Welcome to the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast, presented to you by Hetra University. If you've landed here, you're probably passionate about how horses help people. Whether you're an instructor, therapist, in the business, or have experienced equine assisted services yourself, we're glad you're here. Join us as we talk about the benefits, the science, to-dos, how-tos, and all of the reasons why what we do is so much more than just a pony ride. And now, from the Hetra campus in Gretna, Nebraska, here's your host, occupational therapist Katie King.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Today, I have an incredible guest, just a really, really special person. She was actually a participant at Hetra during her journey, which you're about to hear about. Lauren Taylor, she grew up around horses. She was a jumper. She did that competitively for a very, very long time. And she was a working student in Ireland, actually, for a while. And then she came back to the United States and was a working student here, where you work for a barn and then in exchange get riding lessons and training and that kind of thing. But during her time as a working student, she was kicked in the head while hand-grazing one of her boss's horses, and that accident led to a severe traumatic brain injury. She was in the ICU, she was in the hospital, she was in post-traumatic care for almost an entire year working on recovery. So everything, speech, vision, balance, memory, she had to relearn how to walk, talk, all of that. And now she's back and she is out of the hospital and learning how to ride again. So she spent a brief time at Hetra. Her actual first time in the saddle on a live horse was here at Hetra. And she's going to speak to us today about just how much horses have helped her and motivated her and really kept her going throughout her entire recovery process. So if you're in the mood for goosebumps and a really, really good message, keep listening and stay tuned. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Lauren.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So, Miss Lauren, you know Hetra, and you were here for a little while on your incredible journey that you've been through. And I think you are someone who can really vouch for how much horses have touched your life and how much they can help you. So I'm going to let you just get started and tell us who you are and how old you are and just a little bit about you.
All right. Well, my name is Lauren Taylor. I am 21 years old. When I was 19, I sustained a severe traumatic brain injury. I was hand walking a horse, and I guess the horse spooked at something, spun, and kicked me in the head with his hind hooves. So I fell to the ground and I wasn't breathing and my heart wasn't beating. And then there was a cardiothoracic surgeon who happened to be standing right there with a neurosurgeon friend of his, and the two of them revived me. And I'm so grateful for them because I'm here today and I'm making a recovery and a very solid one. So I'm very grateful for it. I started riding when I was 4. Got my own pony when I was 5 or 6 years old. I was competing in the ponies competitively starting when I was younger, and then I moved up to my horse when I was 12, and then I was a working student, which just means that I worked for a guy who was in Europe, and then I helped take care of his horses, and in exchange for that, he'd help me learn to ride better. So that was a fun thing. And then I came back to America, and I was lucky enough to work as a working student here under a family, and then got a job the following year. Yeah, the rest is history. That family was the one I was working for when I got the brain injury. So
you grew up knowing how much horses can help people.
For sure. I mean, I grew up knowing that if I was having a bad day, I could always go to the barn and talk to my horses. I sound like a crazy lady, but
Every person listening right now is probably an equine person, and everybody's nodding their head. Yep, me too. Because we all do that, I think.
yes.
So after your brain injury, tell me about your journey. You were hospitalized for almost a year, weren't you, after your injury?
Yes.
So tell me about that a little bit and your rehab process, because you went from, on a ventilator and lowest level you can be in a coma scale, right?
Yeah.
To where you are now. So tell me, briefly just a little bit about what that process was and how it was for you.
It was the longest year or two of my life. It was painfully slow at times, and it was hard to keep getting up every day and putting my best foot forward and trying to make as good of a recovery as I could. But I always just had the horses to go back to, and I had the horses to keep me going, just be in the barn with them and hang out with them and ride. Like, it helped me a ton.
You had sent me that YouTube video of kind of your progress and all the videos that you put together. It was I just want to tell you how amazing and how hard I know that you must have had to work to get to where you are now, relearning how to walk and talk and use your hands and use your feet and do all that. And then, us equestrians are on the other side of that saying, you taught yourself how to walk again, and then now you're riding again, right?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for that. But yes, I mean, that's always been a big goal of mine. Just get me back on the horses, get me back doing what I love. Like, walking's great and all, but before that, I want to ride.
Where did you sustain your injury? In Georgia? No.
Aiken, South Carolina.
South Carolina. And then you were in the hospital for a while, and then they sent you for your post-acute care. They sent you to QLI in Omaha, right? And that's how you ended up here?
Yes. And that's how I ended up at Hedra.
Awesome. Yeah. So at QLI, they have an equicizer, right? The mechanical horse, and they put you on that. How was that, sitting in the saddle for the first time? Was that weird?
Well, it was a Western one, so it was not something I was used to at all. I was like, what in the world is a horn doing on a saddle? But it was good to get my legs like wrapped around the fake horse or whatever. It was just, yeah.
Felt more at home, I'm assuming.
A little bit, yes.
Yes.
But once I got to Hetra and I was able to ride an English saddle, it was much better.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your experience coming to Hetra and, riding a live horse for the first time since the accident.
It was crazy. Well, I was still in a wheelchair when I first came to Hetra. So Ed, who brought me there from QLI, had pushed me up a ramp to get me on the horse, like push me in my wheelchair up the ramp because I couldn't even walk up the ramp yet. And that was how I got up there. And then getting me on the horse, it took 3 people lifting my leg, like they were all grabbing onto me like, oh my gosh, it's gonna fall. So they weren't gonna let that happen. So it was quite a production.
And then did it, like, once you got up there, I mean, what was that feeling like? Did you think you were ever going to get back to riding again?
Honestly, no. I was just convinced for so long that this was it. I remember laying in my hospital bed still when I was in Georgia and just being like, I'm never gonna be able to do anything again. I'm just permanently in a hospital bed. Like, this is it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the motivation that gave me to be back on at Hetra was huge.
Yeah, the progress that you made in, I mean, really for the severity of your injury, you made progress really quickly. And I think that motivation was probably a huge part of that, don't you think? Just to keep going and get back to your horses.
Huge. I always figure if you can get a little back, you can get more back. So then I just kept going, and here I am today, and I am much better off than I was a year or two ago.
Got it. So you're back home now. Are you riding at home now? Are you still doing therapy services with horses, or are you riding at home, by yourself?
I'm riding at home, not by myself quite yet. I'm not back to that yet. But my friend's nice enough to come over with her mom, and my mom helps me a ton. And my little brother, Alex, comes out and to the ring and helps me a ton.
Awesome. When you first got back, because you were gone for a long time, in the hospital and to Omaha for your rehab and all that stuff, and when you got back, like, were the horses so glad to see you?
It was the best experience. My accident happened on May 12th of 2019, and I didn't get home until May 2nd of 2020. So 10 days short of a year. And so my horses were so cute. They all came up to the fence. They live outside. So they all came up to the fence and put their ears forward, and I gave them cookies and hugs. And I was so happy to see them again. I never thought that was going to happen.
Was there ever a time, like in your rehabilitation? I think sometimes when we sustain injuries or, setbacks in a hobby or something, a profession even that we really love, sometimes it's hard to get back to it. Was there ever a time that you were like, I don't want to ride, I don't want to be around horses? Or were you ever scared?
Oh God, no. I think that is the best. Well, okay. The best part of what, like, I didn't remember the accident at all. I woke up so disoriented and confused. And the best part of it was that I didn't remember the accident. So there was no reason for me to be afraid of horses at all. I was like, what? Why would I be scared of horses? I love horses. I just remembered being that little girl who loved horses. So that was what I remembered. And it's all that I want to remember.
Was it easy transition back then?
Yes, very seamless.
Yes. So tell everyone, what you're up to now. I mean, I saw you had shared a news article with me, which we can put in the show notes too, if you don't mind, so people can see what you're up to. But you're doing all kinds of exercises and throwing balls and flipping tires. And what all are you doing now, sister?
Well, so I go to DASA, with DASA. It stands for Disabled Athlete Sports Association. So I go there 3 days per week, and it's a gym that you work out with a personal trainer and one-on-one, and you work out for an hour there each session. And they always have different exercises. There's always something new to do. So I love going there. I feel like I've gotten so much more fit since I started.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest thing that keeps you moving in your recovery? I mean, what keeps you making progress?
Like therapy, I'll always try my best at. Working out in the gym, I'll always try my best at. But just having an external motivator like the horses for me is just huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that horses are something that you can enjoy no matter what, whether it's just being in the barn and like breathing in all the smells, or it's riding, or it's, doing chores or whatever it is. I think you can enjoy horses on so many levels.
Absolutely. I mean, the riding for me is just a small part of it. Just being around them is the biggest part.
Mm-hmm. So what's caring for your horses and things like now post-injury?
Well, now it looks very different. I'm not able to do as much of the work myself, which I hate. But like my mom always has to tack my pony up for me and walk him down to the ring. And I just have to sit in the ring and wait for her. And then she helps me get on. I mean, so kind of less than stellar that I'm not able to do any, well, not any, but just not much of the hands-on anymore. I really wish that I could. It's kind of heartbreaking to not be able to do that anymore. Yeah.
Are those some goals? Like what kind of goals do you have, going forward from here? I mean, you've come so far as far as your recovery goes. I mean, are those things that you want to work towards or things that people are helping you work towards?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm just trying to work as hard as I can right now to get more balance, to get more strength, just, I don't know, to help myself get the best possible recovery that I can. Just because, I mean, I'm still getting so much better all the time. So I'm hopeful that one day maybe I'll be able to do some of that myself.
Mm-hmm. What do you think your recovery would be like if you didn't have the horses?
I don't want to think about that.
It's hard to think about, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, that kind of makes me sad because there just wouldn't be a whole lot of motivation there if the horses weren't there.
Mm-hmm. They're pretty powerful.
Truly, yes. I mean, I don't really have another word to describe them.
This episode of the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast is sponsored in part by
Equiforce. Equiforce is a database that allows you to track every facet of your organization, from horse, donor, and volunteer management to scheduling, grant tracking, incident reports, and tracking participant progress too. This is not a one-size-fits-all setup. Instead, Equiforce personally works with you to learn how your facility functions and takes note of your specific terminology so that they can create a unique system to match the needs of your organization. And of course, Equiforce provides an ongoing training and support so that your database can grow with you. Visit them at www.equiforce.com. That's EQUI-FORCE.com. I mean, getting back on the horse is a completely different set of muscle groups and, balance and all of that. I mean, you did jumping competitively, right? So, I mean, that as best as anybody. Do you think that, riding at Hetra and riding when you got back home, you said you want to build that balance and strength and stuff back. Do you think that riding is helping you do that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I can already tell the balance has gotten so much better. When I first started at Hetra, there's no way that I could have trotted, like not a chance. Now I'm trotting on the lunge at home, which isn't what it used to be, but it's better than walking. So horses were so great in teaching me how to overpower my body with my mind. I mean, that was so helpful because pre-accident, I totally knew how to do that. Like to get a horse to bend going to the right, a little right opening rein, a little right leg to support, and then outside leg and outside rein kind of turn the horse a little bit. So just for me, understanding how to get my body to work to influence the horse, it was just really helpful in understanding different limbs of my body could do different things at the same time. So that kind of carried over to my recovery, because when I was walking at first, when I was trying to walk, my right arm was really stiff. So my therapists were like, loosen your right arm, Lauren, relax your right arm. And so I was able to do that. And I think that the reason that came so naturally for me was because I've been able to do that in the past, like tell myself, do this with this arm or do this with this leg. And I could do that and then carry on with whatever I was working with. So
Yeah, I think riding horses is something that it's a full body thing. Like, what's your hands, your shoulders, your hips, your legs, your feet? What is your entire body
yeah,
doing? And then the second part of that is, how do we use our brains to think about those tiny parts of our bodies to do those things?
yeah. I think, just learning how to overpower my body with my brain was huge when I was recovering and learning how to reuse my body again. So
Did a lot of, some of that stuff come back pretty, like, muscle memory? Like, did your brain, like, could you tell that your brain remembered it, you just couldn't make your body do it? Or do you feel like you had to start over, and relearn all of that from the start?
do you mean with riding or with walking?
Either, both.
Well, okay, the riding I think came back a lot more quickly than the walking. The riding was kind of funny because when I got on here at my house, I could feel my right hand, and my right hand, which is normally affected by hemiparesis.
Mm-hmm.
So normally it's kind of numb and tingly. But when I was on the horse, I felt my right hand. I think a lot of it had to do with there being a lot of muscle memory there.
Yeah.
Um, Walking, no, I didn't really have the same muscle memory with that. It was kind of this foreign thing that I totally had to relearn, like knee angle, ankle angles, like calf engagement, like the whole thing.
Mhm.
I had to learn it from scratch.
Well, riding's way more fun anyway.
I agree.
Well, what would you say to someone who, may have had a traumatic injury, or, something like what you have been through, and are maybe scared to try something like horses or doing therapy with the horses or that kind of thing? What would you say to people that might be hesitant to do that?
Well, recovering from any injury, no matter what it is, takes a lot of grit. And once you kind of grit your way into it a little bit, your eyes are open to the possibilities that maybe you can do other things. And horses are a great thing to try. They will help improve your balance so much. They'll loosen up your hips a lot, and they'll make you so happy.
I think horses are great for lots of physical reasons, riding, but like, what about like your emotional or like mental health or that kind of thing too? Do you think you grew a lot? Just being around the horses that had to be an incredibly difficult, mental space to be in, especially when you competed at such a high level before the injury. And now, here you are, like you said, at walk only on your horse. And, that's a tough mental space to be in when you've done it for so long, differently. Was that hard? And did the horses help you get through that too?
I feel like being back on made me think, okay, Lauren, you'll maybe get some of your life back one day. Like maybe that's possible. Who knows?
I think that it was. I believe that it was, Miss Lauren. You look back on yourself like a year ago and think, wow.
Well, I'm hoping to get more, of course, of my life back, but we'll see what happens.
There you go. Keep working hard.
Yes, ma'am.
This episode is also sponsored in part by
Wooden Horse Corporation and the Equisizer. The Equisizer is a handcrafted, non-motorized mechanical horse used by equine assisted service programs worldwide. The Equisizer requires no electricity, tools, or maintenance and can be used indoors or out for evaluations, warm-ups, stretching, mounting, dismounting practice, and volunteer training, fear, and build confidence with students, clients, and volunteers. It can easily carry the weight of 2 adults, offering the unique option to ride tandemly. To learn more about the Equisizer, visit equisizer.com. That's EQUICIZER.com.
So we were talking a little bit about what it was first like when Lauren got on the horse and, again, and like kind of those first times, especially at Hetra, and kind of her headspace and how she felt. And she said she felt super motivated by it and that she wasn't scared. And that's all super, super good to hear. Cause I know so many people kind of struggle with that after injury. But how did you feel as her mom, her getting back on a live horse for the first time? Was that scary for you, or how'd you feel?
I wasn't scared at all.
You weren't?
I think no. And I remember even in the beginning part of right after her accident, people saying, "Oh my gosh, are you going to get rid of the horses?" And I was like, no, of course not. I mean, it was such a, the thought really never entered my mind. And some of our friends that were into horses were going through that, like, maybe we should not do the horses anymore. And like, never had somebody so close to them have a serious accident from it. And I was like, Lauren wouldn't want that. She doesn't want that. I mean, she can't tell you that right now, but I know, like, her love for the horses, and we all accept that tiny bit of danger. But I knew that they were such a part of her life and such a positive to so many people for so many different reasons that wasn't the route we were going to take.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I was teary-eyed for sure, because I was so happy that she could be, I mean, she was literally, it was a struggle to get her in a wheelchair in and out the first time we took her to head truck to ride. So to get her up there, and then just to see her naturally sit up taller and engage that core, because she has still beautiful posture on a horse. It was sitting in a wheelchair, like 10 seconds doesn't go by, and she was drooping and having a hard time holding up her head, and put her on the horse at Hetra, and her head's up, her shoulders are up and even. And yeah, it was amazing.
Pretty
I was sure at that point that being on a horse, even just quote unquote the walking, was going to be a big part for her to keep going. So
did you see a lot of benefit? I mean, we talked about how like balance and strength and, all of that came back, but also, motivation and emotional strength, all of that. I mean, did you see a big improvement in Lauren after she started riding again?
Yes, for sure. And then we started at Hetra, we started like, how many times a week can we come? Like, it wasn't going to be once a week. It was like, well, can I take her by myself so we can come on the weekends? And even if it's just to brush a horse, I mean, it's just being around the horses. It wasn't like just getting on to ride. It was all of it. So yeah, we just tried to keep coming as much as we could. And then, yeah, coming home, I tried to figure out how I was going to get her up on a horse here, and if we could manage it at home, and putting all that together, just, yeah, because I knew that was going to be the key to getting her going. So
what was, did you grow up with horses, Elaine, or
No, I always loved them. I didn't have them. And it was really after I finished school that I got into them, that I could finally afford to go take lessons. And then 1 lesson a week, 2 lessons a week. And then I was buying a horse, and yeah, the rest is kind of history. So
now here you guys are. How have you seen, even through, pre-injury, how have you seen horses help Lauren or help your family? I mean,
other than the injury, and it's been an amazing outlet for all of us. And my son rides too, not competitively or anything like what Lauren did, but he loves being around the animals. And I can't even, if there's anything going on, it's like go to the barn and it just kind of melts away. So we've counted on them for that since, yeah, they've been around the horses their whole lives. Like, yeah, I rode when I was pregnant. So
it's been on a long time.
It was destiny. Yes. So yeah. And like I said, through this recovery, we would be lost without the horses. Even in Atlanta, when things were, I mean, she literally could not pull herself up in bed, like to sit up. And I remember just like, one little thing after another, like pretend I have the reins or whatever. And you're, just to get her to try to engage the right arm that wasn't moving, or even the legs, like pretend we're posting trot, and to get her to try to push from her feet up. And oh yeah, I mean, all those, I used horse analogies to try to get her to engage different muscles all the way through. So, and that was back when there was not many things that she could move on her own.
Yeah. At that time, in the hospital, those those first days, I mean, and first weeks of rehab and all that? I mean, did you think you'd ever see Lauren back on a horse again?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I did. Every time I come home, I FaceTime or I go out and I'm like, here's Sandor, he's waiting for you, or whatever, that was like, I kept going. And that was like the first picture we got her eyes to follow was a picture of her horse. So, I mean, the therapist tried with all these things. I'm like, oh, we got to get one of her horses because that'll do it. So yeah, we've used the horses all along. So yeah.
That's wonderful. Awesome. Well, I asked Lauren kind of the same question too. What would you say to someone, or maybe a family, someone who is considering therapy with horses, but isn't sure or is hesitant about seeking them as a therapy source? What would you say to a family who might be hesitant about it?
Oh my goodness, to give it a try or 2 tries, because they're magical. I've always said they're magical. Like there's something about horses, and even with non-horse people the way we are, when friends come, they just bring something out in people that they didn't know that they even had in them, in a good way. The horses are always so open to our feelings. They're just so patient and willing to take on whatever we have. They're unbelievable animals.
Thank you so much for joining me for the podcast. I want to, I'm eager to share your story and tell everyone about the healing power of horses. They're pretty darn cool.
They really
They're
are.
pretty magical animals.
They are. Well, as we close here, I always close my podcast with the same question. You can tell me either about your heart horse, which sounds like you may have one.
My heart horse, hands down, no questions asked. His name is Xandor. He is a chestnut gelding. He lives at my house. He's retired, but he was the world's greatest. Well, at least I thought so. In my mind, he was.
How long have you had him?
9 years? 9 years?
Yeah, I think I was 12 when I got him. So 9 years.
What'd you guys do together?
We did just the little child adult jumpers, like the meter 15s. Like he was always game. Any day that I pulled him out, I knew that it could be our day. Like he always brought his A game. It just depended on me whether I was going to pull it together that day or not. He loved his job.
All right. Well, thank you so much for recording with me today, Lauren. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me today.
Yes. Thanks for sharing your story.
This podcast is presented by Hetra University, an educational arm of the Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy. Hetra University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to our participants and the equine assisted services community. Craving more content like this? We invite you to check out our series of webinars and much, much more over at hetrauniversity.org. If you'd like to help us work toward our mission, you can make a donation by clicking on the link in the show notes below or visit us at hetra.org. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, my biggest thanks to you all for helping Hetra change lives one stride at a time.